Nail Down. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. With me is Spencer Limbeck at Spencer_JL. Taking a look at pitching on FanDuel and DraftKings tonight. Definitely some arms to really consider for all formats. But in my opinion, I mean, it's kind of one of those nights where I'm back and forth on a lot of arms here.
Yeah, it really depends on what you want to do with the bats tonight, and then kind of go back and see what you have left over for pitching. A lot of pricing discrepancy between the sites, so we'll definitely break that down as we go along and go pitcher by pitcher throughout the slate.
Yeah, definitely. And this first one here is one that is certainly a discrepancy. Pirates take on the Marlins in PNC Park. Garrett Cole versus Tom Kohler. Garrett Cole is one of those ones that is different from site to site. He's 9,100 on FanDuel and just 7,500 on DraftKings. Overall, I mean, the matchup obviously a little less scary just because Stanton's out of the lineup, and you look at that back half and it's something that he can get through. Vegas is certainly in his favor as far as a win goes, and obviously the Marlins only have around a 3-team total. I'm not quite in on him, but I don't mind him as a value option as an SP2 on DraftKings. Not quite sure he has a ton of upside, but I do think he can kind of pull away with a quality start and a win.
Yeah, and then you especially have to factor in that he's at home. He's pitched very good there. That's a pitcher-friendly environment, so that certainly helps his cause, and that's part of the reason why Vegas is so high on him tonight. But, I mean, like you, I just really don't like the upside. I think I'd go some other directions for the price on both sites. So, I mean, even with Stanton out of the lineup, the back half of that order is really pretty bad for the Marlins. I really don't like it. I don't like the strikeout upside. And you really want to pick some pitchers who can recover if they give up a couple runs just by happenstance. And Cole's not one of those guys who's going to strike out the next two batters after giving up, a bloop 2 RBI single. So, I mean, that's really what I like to target. I know there's not a ton of that upside on the slate, but, I mean, just considering the price and the upside, I don't really like Cole, and I don't think I'm going to roster him. That's not to say he's a bad play. I think he is a pretty safe play, but I just really think the ceiling is limited.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That ceiling is certainly not really there on tonight's slate. And you look at Kohler on the other side, who has pitched well. He's another guy I'm not really fond of the matchup. I mean, the Pirates have been kind of up and down, more average of late after that really horrid stretch that they had offensively. Obviously, a nice ballpark there, but for me, Kohler's just another one for the price I'm not really on.
Right, exactly. I mean, he has been good over the past month, with the exception of his last start. But, I mean, you don't really envision a scenario where he'll be in line for the victory tonight. So that really kind of dampens already a questionable upside. So I think I'll pass on both pitchers here.
Cardinals and Phillies next. You got Adam Wainwright versus Adam Morgan. And Wainwright is another one where, he's more expensive on FanDuel and cheaper on DraftKings. And I think DraftKings-wise is pretty much where you're only going to be looking at him at 6,600, which is nice because obviously the core slate, you got a cheap SP2 potential in Wainwright, who's been very up and down throughout this year. I mean, had an awesome stretch through July there and has kind of been coming back down to his usual ways for where he was in the beginning of the season. But obviously a very solid matchup against the Phillies. I'm certainly okay with deploying him as an SP2.
Right, and in the pitcher pulse today, the article I wrote up on Daily Fantasy Cafe, I compared Adam Wainwright to an analog TV where the signal's cutting in and out and you just really don't know what you're going to get. Lately, the signal's been, a lot hairier than it was in July, where he kind of rejuvenated himself and looked like that ace he had been in the past 5 years. But, I mean, that's really not the case over the past few weeks. Then again, this matchup against Philly, a bottom 5 offense, it could set up nicely for him, especially considering, like you said, the price has really been suppressed due to, him not being good in his past 3 starts. So I don't like him on FanDuel for 8,500, but as an SP2 on DraftKings and Yahoo, I really like those salaries there, and I think you can get away with plugging him in there. And even if it's a mediocre outing, I think he'll keep you in the race as a pretty safe play tonight.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I look at him and I think a reasonable outcome for him is maybe 6 innings, hopefully 7, where he gives up maybe 3 earned runs or so, 5 strikeouts, picks up a win. Because you do expect the Cardinals to back him with some offense against Adam Morgan, who is one of the worst pitchers in the game, and that kind of can transition us into him. Even though the Cardinals aren't good against lefties, Morgan is just that bad that you could just easily fade.
Right. That's the key here for Wainwright is that he does have a great chance of getting the win. Adam Morgan, the lefty, he's battling a little bit of a forearm issue, and it's kind of evident in his recent starts. The most recent 4 starts, he's given up 16 earned runs in 17 innings. So that's quite telling of what we think of him tonight. So guys like Piscotty, maybe even Jed Jerko, Tommy Pham, if he's batting leadoff, I really like all those guys tonight.
Yep, I definitely do too. Next one here at the Astros and Orioles, Wade Miley versus Colin McHugh. And both these guys, I mean, Wade Miley's oddly pitched a little bit better in Baltimore. I mean, better in Baltimore than I expected. Kind of shutting down a couple of offenses and limiting some damage. But come off a pretty bad start against San Francisco. He's been pretty mediocre. I don't think there's really any use for him, even though this Houston team doesn't really light the world on fire against lefties. I think just given the fact that there's still a lot of power right-handed bats in there in that ballpark. It's just kind of one to stay away from.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make this quick. I'm going to say no to both guys. I mean, the matchup's just really not there. The park factor's not there. Both of these offenses are certainly capable of lighting each of these pitchers up. So, I mean, this is a stay away from the pitching standpoint.
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement. McHugh not in play for me as well. Rangers and Rays next here, Matt Andrees versus Cole Hamels. And Cole Hamels is one of my favorite arms on the slate. Obviously, this Rays team, I mean, do have some guys who hit lefties well and were a top team in WOBA against lefties early on in the season. But things have significantly dropped. High strikeout rate, Hamels on the road as a favorite. It all kind of adds up to him being a solid play tonight.
Right, and I think he has the highest strikeout rate of any pitcher going tonight. So you definitely have to like that. I mean, there's a little bit room for concern, him going against some of those right-handed hitters like Evan Longoria. But you also have to consider that Logan Forsythe is injured. We don't know if he'll be back or if he'll be 100% if he's back. Nick Franklin for Tampa, he's swinging a hot bat. But actually, someone else was swinging a hot bat into his head in the last game. Kevin Kiermaier. So he's probably going through concussion protocol right now, so we don't know if he'll be in the lineup. And without those two guys, this Rays offense looks a lot different. They have a lot of left-handed hitters in there. And Mickey Matuk might be hitting cleanup or fifth. So, I mean, that's quite telling of what this lineup will look like. And really Hamels, the strikeout rate, the upside, the park factor in Tampa, you have to really like it tonight, considering he's kind of run through a gauntlet lately at Baltimore, at Colorado, and then at home versus Detroit. 3 very tough matchups where he's really kind of held his own. Hasn't been great, fantasy-wise, but I think the price, the upside is just way too good to pass up, and he's one of my favorite picks.
Yeah, me too. And as you mentioned, in Tropicana, I mean, on the road this year, Cole Hamels has been very solid, ERA under a 2 compared to at home where he has an ERA just slightly over 4. And you look at this Rays strikeout rate, I mean, against lefties, 25%. So that does indicate that strikeout upside is certainly there. As far as Andrees on the other side goes, I guess I'm a little bit surprised that the Rangers are kind of just only minus 133 favorites. I mean, they're not projected for a ton of offense, and I'm not really looking to use them, but I think it's something that I'm just kind of limiting exposure to, just because I know this offense and this lineup is catching a lot of people's eyes.
Right, and Andrees he's kind of in a weird spot where he's a reliever usually coming out of the bullpen. He only pitches 4 or 5 innings, and that Tampa bullpen really isn't that great either. So we've seen the Rangers be up and down a little bit. I wouldn't be afraid to utilize some of them, some of the Rangers hitters if they're at an agreeable price, but they're not actually an offense I'm targeting heavily tonight either.
No. Red Sox and Tigers, Michael Fulmer versus Rick Porcello, and this game pretty close to a pick-em. I mean, obviously 2 right-handers in here that we've used in the past and used in all formats, but here I think the price tags are a little too high for the matchup. For me, this is kind of a game where it's a real gray area on both sides. I don't like the hitters, but I don't like the pitching either.
You don't like Slick Rick tonight?
I mean, maybe we'll toss in a little revenge game narrative against Detroit. I guess you can make a case.
There you go. Now you're talking.
I can't do it.
I mean, he has been good. Detroit, they do strike out quite a bit. They're one of those boomer bust offenses, kind of like the Astros, where they can bite you for 5 runs really quickly, or they can strike out 10 times and only scrape across 2 runs. So Rick Porcello's been pitching very well lately. He has a decent ground ball rate, but he's on the road. I mean, this isn't a great head-to-head matchup where you can envision an easy win. And the price has really crept up because of those really solid starts lately. So, I mean, you add it all together, I kind of like Rick Porcello as maybe a pivot off of Cole Hamels. But, I mean, for a similar salary, I'm probably going to be on Hamels, just for an upside and floor combination.
Yeah, and I mean that's really what it is for me. It's just the pricing that I'm off. I'm just off of, and kind of the same thing goes with Fulmer. Who, I mean, obviously Fulmer's coming off one of his best starts this season, and has been really a solid guy. But obviously a tough matchup here against Boston. Do I think he can have a nice start? Certainly, but paying off the price tag is certainly where I just kind of hesitate.
Yeah, and did you guys see Fulmer when you were in Detroit a few weeks ago, or?
No, I saw Zimmerman's return from the DL, and then immediately after the game, he went back on the DL. So that was what I saw in Detroit.
That's fine.
So, Dodgers and Reds next. Bud Norris versus Tim Edelman. Even though the Reds' offense is obviously boomer bust, but they're much better at home. I'm kind of off of these two pitchers. I mean, in this ballpark, it just doesn't make sense to roster either of these.
Right, and I really don't know what to do. Obviously, Bud Norris has a pretty bad split against left-handed hitters, so Hugh, Joey Votto, maybe Scott Schebler. If he's at an agreeable price, and if you need a tournament pick there in the outfield. But otherwise, Tim Adelman of Cincinnati, I mean, he really hasn't been too bad. So I don't know what to make of the Dodgers hitters tonight. Granted, they have a pretty high total. Overall, a nice park vector there in Great American. But I might just tame my exposure a little bit just because Adelman has been pretty good, and he does have a solid ground ball rate. So, I mean, that's kind of where I sit as of now. Maybe that'll change later in the day if someone brings forth some other information there. But that's just basically what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly see that. And you look at this Dodgers offense, who, I mean, obviously have been much better in the second half, but still not a tremendous offense to go about. But there are still plenty of lefties, and obviously Justin Turner is still right in the middle of it. It just, looking at that front really 1 through 6 there, it still feels like, especially in that ballpark.
And one thing I should mention, this is something I've been paying much more attention to lately, especially when you have these young pitchers, you have some relievers starting games at this point in the season. And that's kind of the case with Adelman. He's not an efficient guy. He might last 4 or 5 innings tops. And then that Cincinnati bullpen comes in. And that's certainly a matchup to target. I mean, you can target some guys just for 4 innings going against the Cincinnati bullpen, and that's all you need. So I kind of take that back. I'm walking back my comments on having moderate to low exposure on the Dodgers, and then, just thinking about that bullpen coming in really, really kind of ups that total for me.
Yeah, I mean, if those guys get 2 at-bats against this bullpen, it's certainly going to be a much friendlier matchup. Jays and Indians next here, Francisco Liriano versus Trevor Bauer. And this one, when I first looked at it, just felt like it was a tricky game to kind of break down. You obviously have the Indians here, who obviously their offense has been rolling of late. Against lefties, they're kind of middle of the road. But Liriano really hasn't been the Liriano of old this year. I think for me, I mean, obviously he is a cheap arm, but I think it's just one I don't feel comfortable using.
Yeah, I'm not looking at either of these guys. I mean, Trevor Bauer, he was poised for a breakout season. You look through the month of June, he really had a nice uptick, but then he's kind of fallen off the radar. I don't know what's going on. Maybe some fatigue setting in as he's recording a career high in innings this season. So, and then you said it with Liriano, that high walk rate on the road against a very capable Cleveland lineup. I just don't envision a scenario where I'm rostering either of these guys tonight.
Now, 15-game slate, I don't think that risk is really necessary. Nationals and Braves next year, Tanner Rourke versus Julio Teheran. And this one, I mean, Rourke is a little bit site-dependent, much more reasonable on FanDuel at 8,700. Obviously, he has pitched well and has pitched well against Atlanta this year. But at 10-6, I mean, with Cole Hamels just 500 more, I just feel like I can easily spin up or even go down to Greinke, who's right there, and obviously Greinke, who we'll talk about later on.
Right. No on DraftKings, just a hard no. FanDuel, sure. I mean, if you're looking for a safe guy, 8,700. I really don't mind that salary. That's 1,000 cheaper than Cole Hamels. I don't think you're going to get similar upside to Cole Hamels, not even really in that range. So there is some merit in spending up there. But I think he's a very safe pick against Atlanta, pitcher-friendly park. And this is a lineup that just really doesn't have much to offer at this point in the season, aside from Freddie Freeman. So his strikeout rate, Rourke's strikeout rate, has just been atrocious as of late. So I think he's a safe pick, not with much upside. Then again, we said the same for his teammate, or at least I was thinking the same for his teammate Lopez last night. He ended up with a gem and 11 strikeouts against the Braves team that doesn't strike out much. So maybe I could be wrong. Maybe Atlanta will just, give him 5 more strikeouts than he usually gets. But as it is on the surface, I just see him as a safe play, safe cash game play, but not someone I want to utilize for upside in tournaments.
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement. The upside for me is a little bit capped. I don't see it against this Braves team that usually doesn't strike out a ton. And on the other side, not really looking to use Taron there, this Nationals offense. And I don't think he'll have a horrible start, but he's always had a little bit of an issue with Washington in the past and still has to worry about Murphy and Harper there in the middle lineup. And then obviously Trey Turner has just been the ultimate addition to what this lineup is capable of late.
Right. And, Teheran, obviously not going to use him tonight, not against this lineup, but that it really kind of drops Rourke down maybe a little bit of a peg because his win odds are dropped a little bit because of that on the road against a quality pitcher. But kind of transitioning to what you said about Washington lineup, this is digressing a little bit off of the pitchers, but I've been watching the past few Washington games, and Daniel Murphy doesn't really look like himself. I mean, it could just be a fluke or something, but he's behind on fastballs. I think the fatigue is setting in just a little bit. I know he had a hamstring issue several weeks ago. Maybe some of that's coming back around, but just kind of a disclaimer there on Daniel Murphy that I don't think he's right at the moment, even though he's been, having an MVP type season. So just something to watch, something I've been observing, just a little, nugget of information there to take with it, if you want.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I don't get around to watching many Nationals games, so that's definitely something to keep an eye out for.
I want to say, watching a Nationals game, if you have MLB TV, that is, click the opposing team's feed, because the Washington broadcast team, no offense if you're listening or if you know them, but they're just like a wet blanket. It's dad jokes that aren't even funny. You don't even know if they're supposed to be jokes, and a lot of silence. So not an enjoyable experience to listen to those guys.
I feel like that's with almost half the teams in the league that I find myself trying to balance out and figure out which one is the actual better feed.
Yeah, it's tough. It really is. I kind of like the Giants feed whenever I watch them. I don't know why. But the White Sox, I know the White Sox homers love them, but I can't stand it. I had to watch a Twins game where it was only the White Sox broadcast. I had to mute that and just play music on my sound bar over it because I couldn't stand Hawk Harrelson.
No, I'm definitely agreeing. The Giants is by far my favorite, so yeah, I'm definitely on board there.
They have a nice balance of extracurricular stuff, fillers, and then just good baseball narrative.
Yeah, it's literally like late night. You throw it on, maybe take a little snooze. That's just how it feels. It's how baseball's supposed to be.
Exactly.
White Sox and A's here, Kendall Graveman versus James Shields. This is actually one of the higher totals on the day. These two right-handers, Graveman's a guy who has had a couple of decent stretches, but he struggles a lot on the road. And I think both these offenses are actually really capable of getting to these pitching targets. So I'm just kind of staying away here.
Yeah, this is like your mini Coors here. And I know there's a little bit of weather in Colorado tonight, so maybe a nice little pivot here to get some cheaper exposure to both of these offenses. Obviously, James Shields, when he joined the White Sox, was absolutely horrible. And over the past 3 starts, he's been kind of reminiscent of that. We're talking 3 starts, 9 innings, 21 earned runs, and a whole barrage of homers along the way. Hitter-friendly ballpark there, U.S. Cellular, especially to right-handed hitters. Cue Danny Valencia, guys like that. Stephen Vogt, really like him as well. Chris Davis, probably the best play on that team. Really like it overall. And then you look at Graveman. He doesn't really have a modest home run to fly ball rate as well to either hitters. So I think you can really look at both sides and just pick your poison.
Yep, I definitely agree. One of my favorite games to target. Twins and Royals next year. Jose Barrios versus Edison Volquez. And for me, I mean, Volquez is obviously a really cheap arm there on DraftKings, 5,600. For me, I mean, obviously a GPP play just because you never know what you're going to get out of him. And obviously this Twins offense, who, I mean, obviously has been incredible here in the second half. I mean, they were a bottom 10 WOBA team, and now they're up near the top 10. So it's always hesitant picking on the Twins, but I do think you can do that in GPPs because there is some cap upside there.
Right, and Volk has really nothing special with his repertoire, so that's where you're kind of hesitant. Doesn't strike out many hitters, but I mean he really is cheap across all sites today. So I think he deserves some merit as an SP2, and I really see him in line for the victory tonight. As much as I hate to admit it as a Twins fan, because Jose Barrios is just not MLB ready, as dominant as he was in AAA this whole season. The talent gap, I mean, just making it to the majors. The nerves, whatever it is. I mean, he's just not ready. I think Kansas City's going to give Volquez plenty of run support. And Volquez really kind of shut down the Twins in Minnesota last week, giving up just 2 earned runs, 6 innings pitched, 3 strikeouts, only 5 hits over that span. So park shift to Kaufman really kind of helps him there too. Don't think you're going to see a ton of upside, but then again, he's one of those pitchers. Let's just call him a Tanner Roark light. Cheaper pitcher in that regard, where not a ton of upside, but reasonable chance at a win. Nothing flashy, but I mean, you can get the hitters you want stacking around him because of that cheap price point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Volquez has pitched 3 times against Minnesota, so averaging about a strikeout per inning. So, I mean, if he goes 5 or 6, there's a good chance that he does kind of match that and gets 5 or 6 strikeouts. So,
right.
Something like six innings, 2 earned, 5 strikeouts is something where I see him, which isn't bad at his price at all.
Right, and as you mentioned, the Minnesota Twins have been really good offensively, like since July 1st, but they haven't really cut down their strikeout rate in the process. It's just the fact that they're hitting a lot more home runs, so that really kind of feeds into Volquez's narrative too.
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned, Barrios isn't quite ready here for the MLB. It hasn't shown any sort of potential or a boom or bust play. It's just been a lot of busts for him. So definitely got to stay away from here. Cubs and Rockies here, Tyler Anderson versus Kyle Hendricks. And obviously I feel like this one's kind of interesting because it's not like Tyler Anderson has been bad. And, I mean, he's been actually reasonably good in Coors, obviously coming off a start in Philly where he didn't really have his best stuff and ended up getting tossed from the game. I don't know. I'm not making Coors a priority anymore, but I'm obviously not using these pitchers. It's just more kind of talking about the hitters and their prices.
Right, and there's a little bit of weather concern, so definitely keep an eye on that. I think we're going to be tweeting out today from the account some weather updates as the day goes along, so be on the lookout for that. Both these guys have a pretty strong ground ball rate, especially Hendricks, who I think is, dare I say, a sneaky GPP pick, especially on FanDuel for 7,600. He's been on fire, and I mean, it's obviously weather permitting, but Colorado kind of likes to strike out too. And I think he can really kind of tame them down and keep the ball in the yard, keep the ball on the ground tonight. So I kind of like him as a GPP pick if the weather pans out. Tyler Anderson, on the other hand, I don't know if I'm going to stack against him, especially for some priced up hitters. I mean, Chris Bryant's salary is just going to be through the roof, especially after that performance yesterday. But it's kind of like just pick and choose maybe 1 or 2 hitters from the Cubs. And then I think there's a lot of better cheap hitters in a similar game environment, as we mentioned, Oakland and the White Sox, that you can really get for a cheaper price point with similar upside. So that's kind of the theory that I'm taking. I haven't really broke it all down from the hitter point of view as to what I'm doing on each site. But that's kind of the macro scope that I have for tonight.
I'm definitely in similar thinking. I mean, other slates we've seen where we make Coors a little bit of more of a priority to get exposure to. But here I do think you can roll with guys like Hamels and kind of pay up on the hill. And as we mentioned, a couple of games, obviously, like the Dodgers and Reds could be a potential one, A's and White Sox. So, yeah, I like the bats here. I like, obviously Chris Bryant. But but the price tags are really hard to justify as well.
Right.
Yankees and Angels here, Jared Weaver versus Masahiro Tanaka. And this one in LA, so obviously decent park factors for both these pitchers. Tanaka's a guy who I don't mind, but I just feel like he's kind of a lackluster arm. I mean, I do think he could have a really strong start here, but as far as upside goes, I'm not quite sure if it's going to be there because the Angels don't strike out a ton, and to kind of pay off that price or upside for him.
Right. He's a guy that I like, don't love. I really kind of feel similar to you. If you can find a site where you get him for cheap, that's not really FanDuel or DraftKings, but, I mean, maybe one of these smaller sites if you can get him for cheap. I really like him as an SB2, maybe even pairing him with Cole Hamels, but that's really not the case, like I said, on FanDuel or DraftKings. And the Angels don't really strike out a ton. Park factor's nice because Tanaka struggles with home runs. Doesn't have to worry about that as much. But then on the other side, Jared Weaver, obviously we're not considering him. I mean, I think we're all in agreement. And when I say all, I think the whole daily fantasy community is in agreement that we're not going to play him at all this season or in the rest of his career.
What's his brother's name? I don't know. I'm losing it right now.
Is it okay? It's Jeff, right?
Jeff Weaver. Yeah, maybe Jeff Weaver plays DFS now. Maybe he uses Weaver so maybe just one person in the entire world.
Maybe. I can't speak to the status of their relationship. Maybe he has a little bit of envy against Jared that he's still in the league and Jeff is selling insurance or whatever he's doing right now. So maybe he stacks against him. Maybe there's some bad blood there. I don't know.
That's true.
Then in that case, there's zero people who take Jared Weaver.
I mean, you're not taking Weaver, and I mean, some of these guys are at decent values. I mean, I'm not a fan of the Yankees offense, but I mean, hard to get away from Gary Sanchez right now, who's the second coming of, I don't know, name anyone there, Lou Gehrig.
Yeah, Gary Sanchez, Lou Gehrig. Yeah, they're probably going to make a statue of Gary Sanchez someday. So, yeah, not a bad play here. I know Weaver's a little bit better at home just because that park factor saves him a little bit, and the Angels' defense is pretty good. They bail him out a lot of times, but a lot of contact going on there. You have to figure some of those hits are going to get down for extra bases. Yeah,
definitely. Brewers and Mariners next here. Wade LeBlanc versus Brent Sutter. And Mariners minus 168 favorites. And LeBlanc's obviously – the Brewers are kind of sneaky against lefties. Obviously, they are worse away from Miller Park, which is why I just downgrade him quite a bit here tonight. But I still don't think either of these arms are really worth a look, especially Sutter on the other side there who, well, you can't even use anyway.
Right. And I was kind of a little bit confused. I know that you said there's a park downgrade for Milwaukee there, but I still kind of like some of those hitters. And I don't really know why Milwaukee's in the bottom 5 for run-scoring projections tonight. Because you look at Chris Carter, you look at Ryan Braun, maybe even Hernan Perez. I really like all those hitters that crush lefties. And Wade LeBlanc, he's given up 3+ earned runs, 6 straight games, 9 homers over that span. So he's given up like 4 straight multi-home run games. And I really think some of these Brewers hitters are going to get a round tripper out of this one. So it's really kind of just, finding the right price point to balance out there. Obviously, Braun's priced up. Carter, you can get pretty cheap. Hernan Perez, you can get pretty cheap. Maybe even the catcher, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Maldonado, yeah. I like him too. He's kind of a boom or bust GPP pick for cheap. And then on the other side, we don't really know what to think about Sutter. But Seattle's projected at 4.82 runs, which is in the top 5. So I'm willing to say, I'll trust Vegas in this one that Seattle's going to get to him a little bit. He's a lefty. So, Deho Lee, Nelson Cruz, Gutierrez maybe as a GPP pick, and even Robinson Cano, maybe a little sneaky pick there in the lefty-lefty matchup as he hits lefty wells. Pretty good as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then Nelson Cruz price on DraftKings at 4,500 is probably going to make him one of the, if not the chalkiest outfielder on the board there tonight. Mets and Giants next. You got Johnny Cueto versus Seth Lugo. And if there's a chance where you ever want to roster a player on FanDuel for almost the price of a Bearman shortstop, you could do it with Lugo if you wanted to.
Yeah. Do you want to?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
No,
I didn't know if you were saying that like that's your strategy, but I'm not going to come out and say it's my strategy because I don't want to give it up fully.
it would leave you with 4,000 for each player if you want to do that. I mean, exactly 4K. So I'm just kidding aside. He's not a guy to use.
Well, I mean, while we're talking along those lines, you could use Jared Weaver too.
I mean, equally kind of similar production there.
Yeah. I mean, probably. I mean, that should be our head-to-head bet today is Jared Weaver or this guy who's going to have more fantasy points overall.
I think we should do it head to head. You and I, we both use Seth Lugo.
Why?
We'll do like $1.80 game or something, and
Okay.
it would be pretty fun.
So it's basically that's just a wash, and it's just the rest of our lineups minus one roster spot.
Yeah. I mean, we're not getting any.
It will be interesting to see how much you can pay up, though.
Yeah, but we'll talk about the other guy here, Johnny Cueto, going up against the Mets team that is struggling. I mean, obviously last night was an odd night for pitching, especially the studs. Cueto's been a guy who really hasn't been the most consistent, but I can see using him in a GPP format tonight because I don't think people are actually going to be really on him. But I do think there is certainly some upside against this Mets offense that supposedly is getting healthier tonight, but I'll wait and see.
Yeah, and you have to love the park factor. Cueto's been dominant at home for the most part this season. His price is a little bit down. I'm talking FanDuel mostly. I think I'd rather have Cole Hamels for cheaper on DraftKings. But like you said, I think Hamels is going to be a chalky play tonight. So that leaves a little bit of tournament rationale for Cueto for not much more salary if you can float that. Obviously, last night the Mets Giants game was kind of an anomaly. If you're shying away from Cueto based on what happened last night, then playing daily fantasy really isn't for you. You really have to have a short-term memory and just trust the overall numbers that say AT&T Park is one of the better pitcher-friendly environments in all of baseball. So that's certainly going to help Cueto against a little bit of a depleted Mets lineup. Like you said, they might get a little healthier tonight, but that's not going to sway my opinion one way or the other. I still think Cueto is very playable.
Yep, definitely agree. Diamondbacks and Padres next year, Zach Greinke versus Jared Cozart. And the Greinke price tag on DraftKings of 8,800 is certainly kind of a fun one to break down. And obviously coming off a start where he was horrendous in Fenway. But you look at Greinke, I mean, he's been significantly better on the road, as many as that guys in that rotation have. Still a Padres offense that really isn't that great against righties. Yes, they've snuck in a few more lefties, but I think Greinke kind of gets through a solid start here. And while he's not my favorite pitcher to roster in daily fantasy, he's still a guy at that price I'll certainly take some shots with.
You know, I understand that and I respect that, but I can't do it, and I don't know why. I mean, a lot of people look at the season-long numbers for the Padres and they say, oh, this really isn't that great of an offense, especially against right-handed pitching. They have a high strikeout rate, but they're kind of like the Twins in that regard, where since, mid-July, early July, they've been a lot better, and it's kind of happened at home. I don't really know what the deal is there because San Diego is a pitcher-friendly park. Maybe they get up for the games a little more at home. Maybe all those 500 fans that make it out to San Diego games at this point in the season, maybe they get them all juiced up and everything. I don't really know, but they're kind of a pesky team right now that's making a lot of contact, scoring quite a few runs. And I don't really know if Greinke is at the level confidence-wise or stuff-wise to really get through and justify his price point. So having said that, I'm going to look towards Cueto. I'm going to look towards Hamels. I'm going to look towards even Tanaka over considering Greinke tonight.
Yeah, I could definitely see that too. I mean, it's not like Greinke has been the most reliable option. In terms of when I go to lineup construct, I mean, he's definitely not my first choice to use. But if I do need to kind of maybe get the extra bat or two, or I want to work something in, Greinke might be a guy who I do come down to use. Probably I don't want to say it because that's not something I feel completely comfortable with, but even cash games. And I'm talking specifically DraftKings here.
Right. I guess I was talking more towards FanDuel, where his price is kind of wedged between Cueto and Hamels there. Don't really like that. But DraftKings, yeah, I could see a little more rationale because there does have that narrative where you're talking towards the salary a little bit cheaper than those other guys. And then transitioning to Jared Kozart here of the Padres. I mean, all you really need to know is that this guy has more walks than strikeouts this season, and kind of just leave it there and walk away. No pun intended. From using him tonight, especially against the Arizona offense, it's really kind of waking up.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I kind of like this Arizona offense, kind of some sneaky plays at some of the right price tags, more so on FanDuel.
Yosmani Tomas?
Yeah, he's a baller.
I have a little bit of love for him because I had him the past 2 times he hit 2 home runs. So
how can you not?
I'm kind of the Yosmani whisperer, but I'm not going to have much exposure tonight. So take that for what you want.
All right, then I guess I'll downgrade my shares too.
Okay.
That's going to wrap things up with the pitcher nail down. Be sure to check out DailyFantasyCafe.com for all great tools and content.